And then let me go over here. Okay, are you ready?
Sorry, let me pull up my
Oh yeah, you're
notes.
good.
The way that Canva work, I mean not Canva works, that Zoom.
Mhm.
Mhm. Hmm. Or try it one other way. Perfect. I think if I minimize this Zoom screen, it might perfect.
Okay.
It's true. Hold on. Give me a quick second. Let me
Yeah,
clear
you're
this
good.
screen. Every time I think I got it down, I don't. I don't know. My computer's acting funky, but I think that should be good enough. Okay, we can go
Okay.
ahead and start.
All right. So how did your time at St. Mary's College shape your future trajectory, not just in your professional life, but also in your advocacy and personal life?
Yeah, I would say I think St. Mary's and when I say St. Mary's, I feel like my college life has really shaped my trajectory. As I had mentioned, I was in between going as a marine biologist into college or going in the anthropology route. And with St. Mary's, it was one of the colleges that accept me through the anthropology route. So that's what I chose to do. And I would say like my whole experience, whether it's like inside the classroom and what I was learning to then also like where I worked in Salsa and being involved in that type of like social justice advocacy, um, care for others type of work. And then outside of that, my own participation in like civic learning and engagement through our struggle. I feel like it completely reframed like this is what I know I'm passionate about. This is what I know I'm good at. So I was able to merge all those, like what I'm learning in my classroom, and what I'm not learning in my classroom, which sometimes was a little bit more like um, more apparent than what I was learning in my classroom and what I was eager to learn, but I felt like I didn't get at St. Mary's. So all of these different experiences, I think, completely transformed what I wanted to do, where I saw myself. Um, I think I would say to start with the classroom, I took some amazing courses. I was an anthro major and a Spanish major. Oh no, yeah, I did major in Spanish. And I took a lot of like Latin American history classes with Professor Dr. Mirna Santiago, my anthro professors, Dr. Herrera. I was able to participate in a I think it's National Science Foundation. Again, it was so long ago, but it was like a research project during the summer of my junior year to my senior year where I got to work out of Chinatown and do some ethnography work with one of the professors. And so I feel like this really set me up. Like I love this type of work. I like learning about different cultures. I like understanding things that aren't on the surface, but a little bit more of like why people do things, what culture has to do with it, what policies and laws within the cultures themselves have people thinking certain ways. And so I think that really kind of was feeding a piece of me of like that curiosity of like wanting to know more, wanting to explore a little bit more. And then again, with my work with Silsa, I think Silsa, being part of Silsa was the best thing I could have done at St. Mary's, having Ryan as my supervisor, and then being able to really explore what it meant to be to do like not charity work. Because, you know, I had come from a mentality that like charity work was good work, was ethical work, and having those things questioned while I was at St. Mary's, having like what does it mean to be in solidarity with a community versus like doing charity for that community, or thinking that like it's my job to give someone dignity versus it's like to support people to like have their environment be in a way that that is what they want and have them have autonomy and they know what's best versus like, oh, here I am a college student and this is what I think you should do. Like all of these experiences really made me at St. Mary's question what I thought I knew and what I thought about myself. And with that, like I went into St. Mary's as an extremely Catholic individual. I was part of um, like retreat organizing for like the Sacramento region for the Catholic Church. I was a youth organizer. We put on retreats throughout the years, or throughout the year for various years. And I was really, really involved in that. Again, I went into St. Mary's as like, these are my values, these are my core values, and like it won't shift. And I even remember a priest at my hometown when I told him I was studying anthropology, was like, "Well, you need to be careful with that." And I was like, huh, like, hey y'all, welcome in. I remember being like in anthropology, I was like, no, 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 I'm not studying archaeology, where like, we question evolution and if God created things. Like, I'm not studying that part. I'm studying about cultures. Like, why? And he's like, no, that's exactly what you need to be careful. And I just remember it didn't make sense. And now it makes sense why he was saying that, right? Because um I was learning that other cultures have different beliefs and that they're not universal beliefs to what I believed. And that really made me be like, here I thought Catholicism was like everyone needs to be Catholic and I'm gonna work to like evangelize everyone to become Catholic. And then all of a sudden, like, wait, people have different beliefs and different ways of being and different values, right? So I would say by the end of my St. Mary's trajectory, because I was able to even question not just society as a whole and power, but I was even to question my own ways of thinking about the world. It completely changed who I came out of St. Mary's. Again, I had the experience of being able to study abroad. At that time, I went to Mexico, I went to Peru, I went to Argentina, I went to Brazil. And those experiences just completely transformed my ability to, I think critically about myself before thinking critically about anybody else. And that completely, I would say, changed my life. From there, I went on kind of like hungry for more Chicano studies that I felt like, sure, I learned about a lot of different cultures, but I was still the main person in my classes, like kind of like speaking on behalf of the Chicano identity or speaking on behalf of like the Mexican experience. I felt like I wanted to learn more and be a little bit more yeah, just learn more about my own culture and about not only my culture, but about our history, about how we play into the role of the United States. And so I took a year off thinking I was going to work, but I graduated when it was like within the first 2 years of the big economic depression in 2008 into the following years. And so I couldn't find a job anywhere. And one of my friends was like, if you go get a master's degree, you don't have to pay student loans and they're on deferment. And at that point, I was getting like nonstop calls from um, Sally Mae at that time, being like, you owe $1,000 every month. And I was like, I can't find a single job. So I decided like it just makes sense to go back and to get a master's degree in Chicano studies because I know this is my passion. And I never really questioned like, what am I going to do with this? And I think I did have the deep privilege that my parents never questioned why what I wanted to study. I know for a lot of folks, parents are like, what are you going to do with that? You should study business or you should study nursing or you should study something very tangible. Um, and I didn't have that. I had my parents being like, what are you studying? And I'd be like, I want to do anthropology. And they're like, cool. And we would talk about things I had learned in my history class or anthropology class. Um, and I just felt in my heart like this is what I really care for. And so I went on to do Chicano studies, thinking I wanted to become a professor. I was deeply deeply moved by the dope professors I had at St. Mary's that I was like I want to be them. I don't even remember the name of my first seminar professor, but I remember he had such an impact on me on like I never thought being a professor was like a possible career. And then being in that class and seeing how he navigated this, being like, wait, you get paid to like have these conversations? Like I have to go, I'm doing this because I have like I'm in class, but you're like getting paid to like ask questions and push us a little bit further. And so I went in saying like, oh, thinking I want to be a professor of Chicano studies. Um, and that was my trajectory. And I knew like I just want to do what I'm really passionate about. And if I can make a career out of it, cool. But I'm still going to be doing this type of work regardless if I end up in an office job, regardless if I end up, I don't know, being in education or being in the corporate side or being in a nonprofit. I just knew like I want to support my community. I want to make sure that, like, when we talk about justice, my community is included in those conversations and get to make those decisions. And so, um, I would say, yeah, that I don't know if St. Mary's is unique, that I would have only had this experience at St. Mary's versus if I would have gone to another university. But all I know is I did have that experience at St. Mary's, that really set up the foundations for me to then be like, I got a taste of what this felt like to do this work, and I know this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I know that if I don't do social justice type work or advocacy work, that I will be like a very unhappy human being. And so then, I will say that 100%, this time, these 4 years that I spent there completely solidified, if it hadn't been before when I was going in, that I wanted to do social justice work within my community. And hopefully I'm getting paid doing it, but even if I'm not.
Great. I'm gonna skip the next question for now because you kind of answered it. But
Okay.
were there any specific lessons, relationships, or experiences from your time at St. Mary's that stuck with you and shaped how you navigate your career? And also, I know what you do for a living, but could you just say it for the video so that way we have it?
Yeah, of course. So I work at a local community college in Northern California, and I oversee their intercultural center. So, um, sorry, let me reread the question because I got
Sure.
distracted. Yeah, I would say I'll start with relationships. I feel like the relationships I built with a lot of faculty and staff really shaped, like, I knew what type of again, thinking I wanted to go into being a professor, but even now that I'm not a professor and completely don't want to go that route at all, like I still see myself as an educator, and the relationships I built with the professors, I knew like this is the type of person that I want to be a mentor like. And this is the type of person I don't want to be a mentor like, right? So those relationships that I was able to have, I would say Professor Mirna Santiago was our advisor for Hermandad, but also I took, I want to say like as many classes as she offered, I took those classes because I really, really enjoyed learning from someone like herself that again, like this is her passion, Latin American history, and like she's actually done work in different countries and just her life trajectory, which if you're interested, you could learn more about her. But just learning about like it is possible to like hold these values in your heart, in your head, and then also in the work that you do. And so I would say for me, those type of relationships of like, how do I want to be a mentor to other people? How do I want to support my students when they are going through something difficult or when they're coming to me for advice, is something that still to this day has shaped how I navigate my life and also how I navigate being an educator within higher ed. I would say some lessons that I learned through our struggle was really on how to kind of see a problem and work on it and see it through. And so one of the things that I remember that really stuck up out to me is the way in which with our struggle we were practicing like a collective process of inquiry. In the past, when I had been doing like leadership and organizing, like someone had already set the foundation and was like, this is how we've done this for the past. You're the president now. This is what a president does. This is what you work on and you move forward, right? I'd been in MITCHA and many clubs. I had, again, that organizing within the Catholic Church. I was like a teacher for kindergartners in catechism, like, but someone had preset, this is what you're supposed to do. And in our struggle was the very first time that we were like, we have zero blueprint, and we really felt like we were starting it from scratch. And how do you organize like from scratch with a bunch of different diverse folks that have different expectations, different values? Um, and even though we didn't use this language now, looking back, I feel like that idea of a collective process of inquiry, where really we're getting together, we're asking questions among ourselves. Like no one's here telling us this is what you need to do. We're like, what should we do? How should we do it? What are the values that are aligned to that? Is something that really I think is powerful not only for me in my outside of my career role within my community, but also within my career. And then I would say the other thing that really our struggle supported with is this idea of insurgent learning. Um, Whereas similar to that collective process inquiry, but really we're like, okay, what are we learning right now? How do we go back and how do we make decisions and consensus with it? And then how do we become flexible? Well, we thought we were going to do this, but based on this response, we're going to move and we're going to organize and we're going to do something different. I feel like that's something within my own career, and something within the center that I oversee that I think I'm a little bit more manual in the decisions I take because of that. I feel like many times as leaders, I oversee. I have different employees that work in the center that I supervise. I am part of a larger department where I would say I take a leadership role. And many times when you're in that leadership position, we get taught that leadership looks a certain way. Like you're like, no one questions me. I say something and everyone does it. And if people have questions, it's somehow questioning or disrespecting me. But really through our struggle, I think for me, it made a huge impact that I'm like, look, we're going to try this out. Let's hope it works. And if it doesn't work, we learn things along the way. We learned what worked, what didn't work. We got feedback. And now we're able to come back and be like, oh, the way that we set this program up or the way we did this thing didn't work. Apologize if we created any harm, and then move and try to do better next time. And I feel like that experience I didn't get anywhere else. I didn't get in the classroom. I didn't get at work because everything was preset versus this experience in our struggle of being one of those leaders and making those difficult decisions allowed me to be okay with like messing up and making those mistakes. I'm trying to think of what other question. Um, I would say um studying abroad to this day, like I thought I was going to travel the world, when I left and when I graduated, and that was going to be my life. And the reality is, like, other responsibilities hit in. I became a graduate student. I then had to work full time. Then I had a child. And so I haven't had the experience to travel the world um, outside of really when I was at St. Mary's, studying abroad and being able to do certain Jan terms outside of the United States. And so I think those experiences, even though they were like 20 years back, I still really hold um, that were so powerful to really like get me outside of the bubble that I had created for myself, not only in St. Mary's, but like as someone in Northern California. Being able to meet people, even when I studied abroad, I didn't know anyone. I studied abroad with a program that was outside of St. Mary's, so I went in and really forcing myself to be like, I have no friends. These 20 people, I'm going to have to like make friends with some of them within the next 3 months because we're going to be together a lot. And being able to build like lifetime friendships through that, I would say had an impact of me just coming out of my shell. Of St. Mary's was still a very safe choice for me, was still a very like comfortable choice for me. As I had mentioned, I knew someone from high school that had gone to St. Mary's as well. So, and they became my roommate. So it already felt like I didn't have to try too hard to break out of my shell. And then being able to study abroad completely changed that for me. And I think that really had an impact on then how I was able to navigate St. Mary's for the next year and a half that I was there.
You don't mind me asking, where did you study abroad?
Yeah, so I did it's called the International Studies Abroad program where they did a three-country program in a semester. So we did a month and a half in Guanajuato, Mexico, a month and a half in Lima, Peru, and then a month and a half in Buenos Aires,
Oh,
Argentina.
wow.
And then for Jan term, I don't think they have this Jan term anymore, but Brother Mark, who passed, he used to lead a program out of São Paulo in Brazil.
Hmm, cool. Okay, Wyatt, do you want to take over with the next question?
Yeah, I can take over on the next questions. I don't know what's going on with. Hi. Okay. So for my next questions, it's kind of an add-on, just kind of
Mhm.
okay. All right. Did you ever feel pressure to move away from your identity or your values as you kind of moved forward in your career path? And if so, how did you navigate those pressures?
Yeah. I would say that very luckily, no. I know it's not a common experience. Um, but based on everything I shared about how I was raised about really strongly in my Mexican identity, and that was something core to me since I was a kid and through up, I was always like holding that as a forefront of one of the important aspects of myself. I don't think I ever felt pressure to move away from my identity. Yeah, at all. One thing that I will say is my values. There is this expectation that like the more that you move along higher ed, um, that you're gonna have to like negotiate your values, right? Like if you want to make it into the corporate world or you want to make it into higher ed, you have to act a certain way or you have to like let go of certain things. And I feel like even though those questions have come up, I had the deep privilege of surrounding myself with folks that helped me be true to like my values and not lose my values. Even in my current career, knowing that like at the end of the day, I could lose all these material things, but I will not be okay with losing my values and losing what I believe in and who I am. Um, it just has been a process of little by little me being more and more comfortable defending myself in these spaces where now on campus I'm known as being that person that I will waver on a lot of things. I will not waver on social justice. I will waver on a lot of things, but I will not waver on centering the folks that are most marginalized. And I get a lot of colleagues who are young in their career coming up to me and being like, how do you do it? And I was like, when I first started, I was so shaky. I was so like, oh my God, am I going to rub the wrong person the wrong way? Um, or the right person the wrong way, possibly too. Um, but I feel like the more I like grounded myself in my identity, the more I grounded myself in my values, the more that I could reflect back of like, this is my North Star. And as long as I have moral clarity in my own, then I could say I'm doing X, Y, and Z for that. And I will say I make mistakes constantly trying to figure out how to follow my North Star, right? When I was at St. Mary's, I would say I was like a liberal. I deeply knew that the United States had issues. I deeply knew that there was racism. I deeply knew that there was homophobia and sexism, but I still accepted the state as something that I would justify. I think moving on to graduate program where really made me question that, being involved in different community groups in San Jose really shifted my lens where I thought I was super radical when I was at St. Mary's and I was like, oh man, like I don't know, half of it to where I am now that I do not consider myself at all a liberal. And I hold true to like abolitionist values, where I really believe that that is my guiding star, that autonomous, some folks call anarchist values are the values that I align myself with. And having that as my North Star and understanding it and really doing research on what that means for our communities, what that has looked like throughout history, um, for me has allowed me to, whenever I am in a situation at work that kind of makes me feel a little shaky, that makes me feel like, should I stand up for this issue when I know my students are being harmed by the police presence on campus? Being able to like reflect back and hold on to those values have allowed me, I think, to become really vocal on my campus and be known and respected as someone that is very strong, not only in my identity, but in the values that I hold.
Uh, Splendid. I guess kind of like a small follow-up. This is just a personal to me.
Yeah,
Have you ever been worried about like, and this isn't tied to the regular questions.
yeah.
Have you ever been worried about rubbing the wrong person the right way? Like you say something that like makes somebody you don't want like believing.
Yeah, I would just say like I struggle speaking. Like I'm like, ooh, I'm really good because I'll just say what I'm thinking and later I'm like, ooh, I shouldn't have said that probably. And I've been in situations specifically orally, and I think it just has to do with I've been trained to like make my arguments on essays, right? So I think I'm pretty good at like making my arguments via email and via print, but orally I still feel I say more than I should have or not what I was thinking. And in those situations when I have had that conversation, um, constantly people are like, "Oh, you're trying to say this," and then I'm like, "Oh my God, did I say that? Hold on, let me go back and think about it." And I feel like something that I've learned is to like be okay in the moment to be like, "Wait, let me pause and let me reflect. is that what I was trying to say? And what I found more likely than not is a lot of people have really similar radical ideas um, that I do, but because of like the way the political spectrum has created and justified itself, that people are like think that we're in completely different sides of the spectrum when really on the core base we agree on things, except you align yourself with like one politician and I align myself with like a community organization or movement. To say all that, there's constant times that like I'll say something and people agree with me, and I was like, I don't think you think I'm saying what I'm saying, so let me just clarify what I'm trying to get through. Or it could be that like maybe we do have more in common than we both initially thought we did. Does
All
that answer
right.
your question?
Yeah, it was just kind of a funny thing that I was thinking
Yeah.
about. I guess now you were talking about St. Mary's.
Mhm.
Is there something you feel you missed, like to experience, learn a specific opportunity? Is there something you think you missed while at St. Mary's?
I don't think so. The only regret I have while being at St. Mary's is when I studied abroad in Peru and I had no money, and they were gonna have a weekend field trip to Machu Picchu and for $500, and I just didn't have $500 to pay it. And so like literally out of my time at St. Mary's, that's my biggest regret. Like when am I gonna have the opportunity to go back for like a 4 day stay at Machu Picchu? Probably not till I'm much older. And so that is my regret that I was too poor to be able to afford going to Machu Picchu while I was in Lima. But I will say like St. Mary's created the culture where like if you wanted to get involved, you would, at least when I was there, like anything I wanted to do, places I wanted to participate in, um, there was a possibility of me doing that, or if not, me creating it. So I'm really trying to think, and I don't really think I missed out. Um, I never did sports in my life, never was really interested in sports. And so I didn't do that at St. Mary's. I went to a few basketball games because that was like the cool thing to do. I had no idea what was going on. I just liked the vibes and everyone having fun and yelling and screaming. And I did that when I wanted to, and when I didn't, I did not. So yeah, I don't think I have any regrets. My biggest regret though, um, that to this day is my regret is going to St. Mary's. I didn't have the money to go to St. Mary's. I got a ridiculous amount of loans out. I was one of the people that was preyed on with wild interest rates that I will end up paying over 500% of what I originally got out. And that is my biggest regret.
Okay, that's actually really interesting. Um, well, I guess I'll ask my last. When you think about everything you experienced as a young adult in college, do you feel proud? Do you have any regrets of the things you experienced other than going to St. Mary's?
Um, do I? No, I feel really proud. Again, 15 plus years. I look back and could I think of how I could done things better? 100%. I think, something that I have learned over the years and really like embraced is this like restorative justice concept that again, before as someone in the way I thought about the world, it was not. Um, and I feel like the deep conflicts that we had between the folks in our struggle could have been addressed, I think, um, if we had better support. And I don't know if that was support through St. Mary's, if that was support through advisors, if that was support between ourselves. But there was a lot of conflict that like kept us from like we never talked. Some of us to this day have not talked to each other because of the really high conflict that grew. Do I think that these people would have deeply made a difference in my life? Like, no, I don't have any regrets that I don't have relationships with some folks that I was friends with in college. But I do regret not having any tools for how to address conflict. I feel like that is the one thing that I really missed at St. Mary's, and I don't know if colleges do this or not, but like, how do you help teach really young people that are learning to live in these communities how to address conflict. Like you had an issue with your roommate and you would either hold it in or you'd like cuss them out. There was no like really addressing the conflict. So I would say that that is my regret of like what I didn't get at St. Mary's.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. That's going to be the bulk of my questions. Would Kevin want to take over?
Sorry, it took me a while to get off of mute. Uh, so basically, like, I just want to know, you mentioned the values of like what you gained. Like, what were those certain values that you like gained from St. Mary's? And then like in your lifetime, like, as you graduated and went through life, has those values grown or changed?
Yeah. So I would say Um, I have completely changed. Like the person I was at St. Mary's, I am not at all the same. Some of the core values, as I said, that I held on to St. Mary's, I no longer hold on to. Um, but one thing that I think has been true, and I'm just figuring out different ways to do it, is this idea of social justice and like anti-oppression. That has always been like a thread in my life and a huge thread at St. Mary's that with the knowledge that I had, with the education that I had, with the people that I had surrounded myself with, um, social justice and anti-oppression for me was like, this is how you do it. This is the answer. This is the way to go about it. Um, and that has stayed true to this day. Like I am still deeply committed to social justice. I am still deeply committed to anti-oppression. But throughout the time I left St. Mary's, as I said, I thought I was like super radical at that time to now, and the community organizations that I've been able to surround myself with that really made me question like has the way I try to go about it at St. Mary's, is that the best way to do it? The different scholars I have read really have allowed me to be like, social justice and anti-oppression is the true way I try to live my life. But every time I'm learning, like, there's different, in Spanish, like caminos, there's different paths to get there, and I'm constantly evolving on what I think for myself and my family and my community is the best path there. So as I said in the past, I thought it was like we just have to fix racism at like the interpersonal level. People shouldn't be racist towards me and I shouldn't be racist towards other people. Through more learning, I realized like, wait, this is a core foundation of this whole society, right? And so then what does that mean and how does that look like? And how do we address these oppressive forces if we still have um, the validity in institutions like the police, if we still have the validity in institutions like we're seeing right now in a federal government that is not supporting the most marginalized and the society as a whole. Like if the government isn't here, to help its people, then what is the government here for, right? So all these questions and all these ideas that I wasn't thinking about as at St. Mary's, I was mainly thinking about it like interpersonally and like racism should end in one way, but how have I have gone about the values that I've been able to like really hold on to at St. Mary's, that hasn't changed.
So, with like, you being out of St. Mary's for a while, what are things you recommend for students to strive in life with having this education? Because a lot of times people go to school and then don't use the skills in everyday life. Like, what do you recommend to do with like this college degree?
Yeah, I would say so I'm a mother and I look a lot into like child development um as a way to become a better parent to a little one. And something that someone said, and I can't remember at all the scholar, I was raising my child to be monolingual Spanish speaker until they went to school and now they're bilingual. And this scholar was saying like just because you have bilingual children does not mean you're going to have bilingual adults. And what they were trying to say is just because you're raising your child to speak this language now, if you don't constantly reinforce it, if it doesn't move with it, if they're not constantly learning it, just because You knew that language when you were 3 years old does not mean by the time you're 20 that that's going to be your core language. And we see it within many of us that are first generation or second generation Mexican Americans or Latinos or immigrants. Like myself, Spanish was my first language. Now I'll still struggle in Spanish because, right, it wasn't reinforced in the way that English was throughout my academic career. And I say that with many times people think like this is who I am in college, so this is who I'm going to be the rest of my life. But if you're not constantly like feeding who you want to be, then you won't be that person. Like we don't have we're not these like box shaped people that like once we're set and we're always move this way. Again, like the reason that I've been able to hold on to and do social justice in my everyday and I get paid good money to do this work is because I chose that this is going to be my career and I chose paths that help me align myself to this work. I could have gone a completely different way. I know folks out of our struggle to the day now, like let's say almost 20 years later, if they look back at themselves, they might see complete polar opposite people that are defending complete polar opposite demands in their day-to-day lives. And so what I will say to folks that are trying to do this work and continue to do this work is you just have to be really intentional that this is your passion and this is the work you want to do. Because even though I make really good money now, like there was a point when I got out of grad school that I was like barely getting by, that I was living in like an apartment that was infested with cockroaches because that's the only thing that I could afford, right? Like knowing that like at the end of the day, like this is what I'm committing my life to do. And whether it's like for me, it's social justice, right? That's what I'm talking about. But for other folks, it's like this is what I really want to do. You just can't accept that what you're doing at St. Mary's now is somehow going to hold you through if you're not constantly like filling that bucket time and time again. I would say like take classes that you weren't expecting to take that might open your mind a little bit more. Um, and then for me, some of the biggest learning that I had was when I was at San Jose State, but not even at San Jose State at in the classes, which were amazing, but I surrounded myself with community organizations that were doing such amazing work that really made me question like all my beliefs of like, oh my gosh, like there was a organization called 50/50 Crew where it was like college students working with high school students. And it was this idea that like we don't need to teach high school students anything. They are 100% capable and 100% smart. And their critiques of school don't need to be taught by like academics. Like you need to think about it this way. Like they already have such intelligent critiques of the things that they're doing, right? So those ideas that I was like, whoa, I thought I was supposed to come in here and be the teacher and teach y'all all everything you need to think about. So really, really involving yourself with community organizations that are like, cool, you know how to write a 20-page paper, but like, really, what are you doing for your community? Really made me sit through of like, whoa, what am I doing for my community other than like writing a paper that no one will ever read, that it was only for like me to get an A, but like it's more important the work that I'm doing in my community than those papers that I'm writing for my school.
My following question is very similar to what you're saying. Basically, how do we create more welcoming spaces in like jobs and schools? Because you know, a lot of times, like especially in this time, uh, like you know, many people feel attacked or like targeted in certain locations. How can we advocate like positive change in during these hard times?
Yeah, I would say it's kind of like twofold. So one is, and I don't know who coined it, but I remember at St. Mary's when I was in Silsa, we would be like, think globally, act locally. And it's as cliche as that term is, I feel like does very much do a good job of explaining how there's so many issues that are happening globally, and we get a chance to make an impact when we're looking at our own communities. So, how are we being able to be in solidarity with global organizing global movements and also doing some of that work internally? So some of that might mean like I work at a college that has a police force as its paid employees, right? So as much as like folks could go and argue like defund the police, what does it look like at a local level when were like devoting millions of dollars to a department. Right. So I would say, going back to that piece, in order to be able to do that, you can't do that in a silo. Again, like the biggest impact that I had was being involved with local organizations. And that could be nonprofits, but many times that isn't nonprofits. Many times that is just folks doing the work without an institution backing them up. Community members that decided to get together and organized around a certain topic. Does a nonprofit sometimes do that support? Yes. And sometimes the nonprofits end up co-opting that work, and taking away like the really root of the work that folks are trying to do, and like make it more appeasable to the donors of those nonprofits. So again, when I say like get involved in community organizations, I don't mean an institution, but like what are folks doing in that community organization? And for St. Mary's students, that might be getting involved with student clubs, right? The clubs that are doing the work. That are kind of thinking outside of the lens. I was thinking the other day, and it'll tie back to this question. One of the things that I completely forgot about our time at in our struggle was that we had a huge fight with the student government at St. Mary's. And I don't remember the details. I just remember I didn't know any people from student government. I was never involved in student government. That was not an institution that I participated in. And I remember when we started organizing our struggle, and I remember this in conversation with one of the other our struggle members, Judith, that the student government, I don't know, they were assembly or a group, got really mad at us because they told us we didn't do things the right way. That the way to make change at St. Mary's was, as students, we should have gone through student government. We should have gone through like the correct avenues. And I don't remember too clearly, but I remember being at a student government meeting and like a huge argument ensuing, and essentially, and the reality was that it was mainly white students telling students of color, you're doing it the wrong way. You need to follow the policy and you need to follow the process. And this is what the policy and the process says, how you make change at St. Mary's. And again, I don't remember what specifically we were arguing, and we just left really angry that the student government couldn't see themselves as a way to that they were upholding like the lack of change. Like they were like, if you follow this like 2-year process, you will do something the right way. But all of us were like, we don't got 2 years to try to figure this out. And I say that to come back to your question is sometimes the correct processes are put in place to deter people from doing the work. So then it is important when we're students to think, or when we're community organizers to think like, what am I willing to risk to not go through the correct process, and what benefits do I have if I go through the process, and what benefits do I have if I don't go through the process? So I really think that as someone that was raised in K through 12 in the United States, that laws and processes, we like bite into them as like the standard of that's how things should be done. When in reality, those laws and policies were more than likely put in place by very specific people for very specific reasons to uphold very specific values that many times don't end up aligning to the values of social justice and anti-oppression. So, and it's a scary place to be in as a student organizer and as any person to be like, I'm going to go against whatever this law is, whatever this policy is, whatever this process is, but being able to surround yourself with other people that are equally as invested as you on making change. I do think, at least at St. Mary's, we were able to navigate it without huge disruptions to harm to ourselves. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes.
If I could add, Kevin, so I really liked your points about AS. I'm not on AS, but I do have a lot of friends that are, and I know that they are like, it's kind of like I mean, they see their main goal as like, oh, well, we're just in charge of allocating the funds, right? And
Right.
it's like it's very interesting because recently, in the last couple of years, they haven't done really anything like in terms of like work outside of allocating funds. And I think it's really, and Kevin, I know that I don't know if you've talked to AS about La Hermandad stuff, but I think it's really interesting that they try to stay out of controversial topics.
Mm,
Like they don't like they all, the people I know, they're like, well, we have to remain impartial, right? And it's
right.
like, well, but what is being impartial? Like
Right.
it's not standing up for the right thing is not necessarily not being impartial. You know what I mean? So it's very interesting that these, and it's not just AS, it's the college as a whole, right? The president's office. Oh, well, we have to remain impartial. We don't want to do this because it's like
Right.
we want to be like seen as like these mediators. But it's like
Right.
at the end of the day, if they do that, really they're just contributing to the problem.
Right.
And Kevin, I don't know if you want to add anything because I know we were talking about this a couple days ago, how, the president's office refused to meet with La Hermandad, and it's like, and they're trying to stay all, impartial because apparently there was something that happened. I think Kevin, you might know more, but something happened the last time something like this came up, and the president's office was like, well, we got to stay impartial to, appease the donors and stuff. And it's like, how do you
Like,
handle all those conflicting forces?
Yeah, I will say, I think you make a lot of really, really, really good points. This idea of like being impartial or being neutral has only ever benefited the like oppressing class, right? Like neutrality is believed to be like the middle of a spectrum when really it is like closer to the oppressing class than it is to the people that need to be liberated from oppression. And second, um, even though I said everything I said about AS, I also recognize that many times really powerful work can be done in these committees. It is soul killing work, but cities and local governments like are making exactly what you said, decisions about funding. And how we fund our communities is literally how we're saying this is what our value is and this is what our values are not. Right? So if you're sitting on a committee and especially now we have so many uh states, I mean not states, sorry, towns and cities going through like, well, we don't have enough money, so what are we gonna allot this money to? If folks aren't sitting on those committees, then the folks making these decisions more likely than not leave or add to the police budget and decrease from the social services budget, right? But if folks are on those committees able to make these and pushing certain support for our communities through, then the conversation would look really different. So just because I was in La Hermandad and we chose not to go through SA doesn't mean that that is not a path. I want to say Marianne Kaba, but maybe not, said there is no place that is not okay. Now I'm going to mess it up. So let me let me hold back. Um, it's almost something like there's no place that's not outside of the fight, right? Of the struggle. Like every place we're in has the potential to be a fight for the struggle. So if you're an AS and you're like, this is where I feel that my skills and my talents could be developed, like how in AS are folks doing the work to ensure that folks are supporting a social justice or justice platform versus if you're like, I don't work that way and I can't learn Robert's rules of order, and I think Robert's rules of order are oppressing. Like, I'm gonna do work outside of it. Doesn't mean that inside AS, not like amazing work can still happen. That we chose not to do it for our various reasons. But again, like in these committees that cities plan, that schools plan, like there's planning committees, budget committees on campus that I don't know if they like. We fought for students to be supposed to be involved in these committees. I don't know if they still are or not, but I'm sure like a lot of really good work could be done of like where are we putting money into and where are we not putting money into? Like those are really important conversations to be a part of.
Yeah, and I really echo your point about having students involved in those things. I think that there are I think in a way that they selectively choose what they want students to do.
Right.
Like, for example, like I'm going to be the co-chair of the honor council, which we deal with all the cheating, right? And of
Uh,
course, that's something that's like, okay, we can just push it off on students because then we don't have to deal with it. Well, less thing we have to deal with. But we don't want to put a student on a committee where they're making budget decisions because
right.
that affects our money. It's like,
Right.
so they're
Right.
very selective about, they want to make it look like students have a lot of say, but in reality, we don't, essentially, is really
Right.
is going on.
Yeah. And they want to tell you how you can issue complaints, right? Like you do it in this way. Once you move outside of the way that they deemed issue complaints, then it's no longer an easy process to control for them. And so again, there's like, well, there's this whole process. If you have a complaint about a professor, I work at higher ed. If you have a complaint about a professor, this is the process. And nine out of, or more like 99 out of 100 times, there's going to be found no wrongdoing because of so many bureaucratic issues. So I really think that we're really dynamic people that have the ability to do multiple things at the same time. And so both being able to work within the established systems and either work within them or change them, and also work outside of the established systems is something beautiful that we're capable as doing as human beings, and even more so if we work within community.
Yeah. Kevin, do you want to add anything?
No, no, you pretty much said any all that we're gonna, well, that was in my mind at least. The only thing that like I would mention is that we are like multicultural clubs on campus. We are having a walkout next Wednesday. Um, so if you want to hear more about it, I can send you more information.
Yeah, I would love that. Since last time we spoke, I reached out to the folks I still communicate with that were part of our struggle. I want to say there's like 15 of us on that chat. And I said like, y'all will let us know more when you want us to like be involved or show up. And so I know that maybe not all of us can make it all the time, but some of us can make it most of the time.
Perfect.
I guess I have a small question.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
How do you feel about like all the current activism stuff going on campus?
Well, so last time what I spoke about is we're really as like alumni like not privy to anything that's happening on at St. Mary's. I've learned a bit from Kevin, but I purposefully, because I say I regret going to St. Mary's because I owe St. Mary's so much, or like the loans so much money for going to St. Mary's, I purposefully chose to remove myself from like thinking about St. Mary's, being involved in St. Mary's. And now that like I'm ready to like go back and support the students that are doing the work. I think there's quite a few of us on the same kind of on the same path. And also like our lives just continued, you know, like you're all like, I'm always gonna go back to high school, and then you graduate from high school and you're like, I have a whole different life and different priorities. So I'm not too well aware other than, as I said, what Kevin said. And I will say that it is disheartening and also not surprising. I feel St. Mary's is, like I said, a microcosm of the larger political system and institutions. And so our hope is that this new group that some alumni are forming, that those of us that were involved and do want to get involved to support St. Mary's students, that we can do so.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Let me see here.
I mean, we got through every question, right?
Yeah, so
Yeah, I think we got through.
I guess yeah, so we got through every question. So obviously this is our last interview. So I don't know if there's anything that you maybe want to add or anything else that you want to say. Like please do if you do.
Let me look through
Yeah,
my
for
notes to
sure.
see if there's um mm, I will say something that I don't think I talked about much, and I don't know if it's part of this conversation, but it still feels really relevant, as I'm sure y'all heard about all the allegations that came out about Cesar Chavez
Mhm.
and the harm that he created. Um, I feel like most movements I've been involved of or have heard about have always had this undercurrent of like um women being exploited and abused in so many different ways. And women doing the labor behind the scenes, but men getting the credit. Um and so I think about that a lot because those were constant things that came up in our struggle on the ways in which um we policed each other based on gender. I will say something that I clearly remember one time. Um, like I'm a talker. Once I get comfortable with folks, I'm like constantly talking. And an issue I have that I definitely could have worked on back then is interrupting. Like people to be talking, I'd be like, "Oh, I have a point. Oh my God, that reminded me of something," right? And I remember one time, and I was one of the few women that was in like the core organizing um, since the beginning of our struggle. And I remember at one point, it's like the middle of the night, and there's a bunch of us at the table, and I remember like just one of the men in our struggle was like completely like blew up and was like, "You're always interrupting people. You need to stop interrupting people. We're tired of your shit." Like da da da, like berated me in front of everyone, and I was like, "Oh my gosh," I was taken aback, and I just remember being super pissed off because I was like, I know I interrupt people a lot, but I know I'm not the only person that interrupts people a lot. But I do know I'm the only woman that interrupts people a lot. So the whole meeting, I was the note taker, and the whole meeting, every time someone interrupted someone, I like put a little tally mark. And I wrote people's names down and I was like taking notes. And I remember at the end of the meeting, I was like, I just want to say so and so interrupted 15 times, so and so interrupted 20 times, so and so. But the only difference is that I was a woman and y'all are men, right? And so we had this huge fight. Um, and and something that like I could have improved on non-interrupting people. Like that was a valid ass critique of me. Like you interrupt people too much. You're always trying to get your voice in. And at the same time, that valid ass critique couldn't be like taken in and reflected on and learned about because it came through a sexist lens. Like if that was a valid ass critique for me, then it could have been a valid ass critique for everyone else, but it wasn't. And then at the same time, um, I assume college is still like this, but a lot of people were hooking up with different people left and right. That's how college was back then. I'm sure it is the same now. Um, and then all of a sudden, for those of us that were involved in our struggle, some of the men started saying, well, if you're serious, you can't be hooking up with anybody. And that really always rubbed me the wrong way because I was like, who do you get to say like the moral police on like what I get to do in my personal life? And it wasn't addressed at the men. Like the men shouldn't be hooking up with people. It was addressed at the women. Like if we're serious and we want to be taken serious, we shouldn't be hooking up with anybody. And so that always really sat with me. And like years after St. Mary's, like people would still come to me with rumors about who I was or was not hooking up with. And that always really felt and what I said last time, like there was always these internal like sexism and this internal homophobia, this internal anti-blackness that no one ever really mentioned that we always like kept under the surface because we had a very specific quote unquote like agenda we wanted to hit. But what we didn't recognize is that these were really important conversations that could have made our movement much stronger if we would have really addressed the internal homophobia, sexism, anti-blackness in the group. But instead, we thought that by addressing it, we would be taking away the power of what we were actually trying to do. Just really, I think at every movement I've read about in Chicano studies, I did comparative ethnic studies. So right in other movements throughout the United States, these are constant issues that after the fact come up of like women being harmed, being policed, being having to do extra labor, but no one wanting to bring it up because somehow it's going to like make the movement look bad or deter from the movement or whatnot. So I don't know where this sits within the work that y'all are doing, but it is something that constantly, every time I talk about our struggle, like it was the undercurrent was always this like constant policing of who we were as women. And and if we did acquiesce to sexual advances or we didn't acquiesce, like we were always labeled as like either a hoe, or we were labeled as like being like what's the word, not prudent, but the opposite of that, right? So it was always a constant like still attempt to like control women, control queer folks, control Black folks and how they decide to express themselves within these movements. So as much as like I think we did really good work, I think this is an important part of what community organizing looks like. It's about those internal struggles, and it doesn't take away, at least in my mind, from the work that we did, but how like do future generations, how are we as future generations coming up in movements able to address these core issues within these movements?
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so Kevin, Wyatt, do you have any other questions?
Nah, I just have my one.
Okay, Kevin.
Uh, it's just, would you, like, you already said yes the last meeting, but like still be in contact and like work with Hermandad next year and continue to like strengthen the club and then strengthen the work that we're doing?
Yeah, for sure. Please reach out to me. Again, as I said last time, I might not be the person that might be able to go out to all of them, but there are different folks that are, I think, wanting to support y'all and connect with y'all. So, always feel free to reach out. And I know that's true specifically for you, Kevin, because you're in that work right now, but that's true for you, Hayden and Wyatt. I hope to serve as a resource when I might be needed, and when I'm not, that's cool too.
Great. And yeah, we'll be in touch too about, you'll obviously see the final project and stuff. But uh great. Well, thank you so much. It's been great doing this with you. And we'll be in touch.
Perfect. And then if you could just remind your professor if he does want us to attend something in person, to let us know as
Yes,
soon as possible, because I
I'm
have
gonna
to
talk, I'm
short
gonna
time off for work.
ask him about that in class tomorrow too. Yeah.
Perfect.
So, and we'll make sure to get you the last two transcriptions
Perfect. Thank
so you
you.
can take
And
it.
I have been super like I don't know how St. Mary's is, but at work I've been so busy. April is like our
Oh
busiest
yeah,
month.
April is busy.
So no, I will like this week and next week I will finish revising the transcript or
Okay, great.
reviewing the transcript and then sending out the pictures by the end of this week for sure.
Great. Perfect. Kevin, do you have something?
How old are your kids again?
Say that again?
How old are your kids?
I have one child. He's 7 years old.
Oh,
Because we do have a Dia del Niño coming up at St. Mary's
Oh,
May
nice.
2nd. If you would like to attend with your kid and stuff, check it out. We're gonna have like food and different like things.
Perfect. Yeah, send me an email about that and I'll definitely try to check it out.
Perfect.
great. Thanks so much.
All right, you too. Bye.
Wyatt, let's see.